So last week I promised we'd go deeper into the roots of feminism. But to do that, we have to talk about ghosts. See, when you study the birth of women's movement in the mid-1800s, you'll find a detail that's usually edited out of the textbooks. You see, feminism didn't just grow out of politics or a desire for the vote. It grew alongside a massive, exploding spiritual movement. While the Seneca Falls Convention was making waves in 1848, another wave was hitting America and Europe: spiritualism. We're talking seances, mediums, people in dark rooms trying to channel the dead. And here's the key that unlocks everything. Women dominated that space. The question is, why? Why did the fight for legal rights start in a room full of people talking to spirits? Hi, I'm Jay. Stick around and I'll explain it. You see, modern feminism didn't just come from a desire for equal rights. That's the surface level story. Underneath, there's a much deeper current. And if you don't understand it, none of the chaos we see in 2026 is going to make a lick of sense. In the mid-19th century, society was locked down. Traditional institutions, especially the church, were the gatekeepers of truth and authority. Women weren't allowed to preach. They didn't have a seat at the table of authority. But spiritualism? That was the loophole. Historian Anne Broad wrote a book called Radical Spirits. She found that many of the most famous early activists, i.e. Victoria Woodhull, the first woman to run for U.S. president, were the ones running the seances. Susan B. Anthony, though not directly tied to spiritualism, often rubbed shoulders with ladies involved in the movement. Think about the psychological shift there. If a woman stood up in 1850s and said, "I think the law should change," people could ignore her, and they often did. But if she stood up, closed her eyes, and claimed she was channeling a higher power, then suddenly she had a platform. People listened. This was a complete inversion of authority. So scholar Catherine Albanese points out in The Republic of Mind and Spirit that these movements pushed a radical new idea. Truth isn't something revealed to you from an outside institution. It's something you find within yourself. You see, once that seed was planted, that you are your own highest authority, it doesn't just stay in the seance room. It leaked into our culture. It moves into identity, and finally, into politics. Because once you believe truth comes from inside you, then any external structure, any law, any tradition, any truth becomes the enemy. It becomes oppressive by definition. Now, while this philosophical shift was happening in the background, the real world was beginning to be torn apart. Between the mid-18th century and about the early 1900s, it was just war, constant grinding war. The Mexican War, the Civil War, eventually the meat grinder of all wars, World War I. Millions of men were gone. They were dead, injured, or thousands of miles away in a trench. Because of all this, necessity took over. Women stepped into the roles men used to fill. They ran the factories, the farms. Women kept the lights on. And here's the part no one wants to say aloud. Once you prove that you can function without something, in this case men, you start to question if you ever needed them at all. And here's the thing, that question didn't just go away when the soldiers came home, because by the time the 1960s rolled around, we hit the second wave. The movement shifted from property rights to liberation. Feminism began to redefine gender roles. And by the looks of things today, we're in the third wave, and I don't want to see what it looks like beyond that. We've reached the final logic of those early seances. Identity is fluid. It's self-defined. It's eternally generated. It's exactly what those early shifts in spiritual authority were pointing towards 150 years ago. So men, where does that leave us? Look around. We live in a world of negotiated reality. Relationships aren't built on objective truth anymore, but rather a constant negotiation between two internal truths. Identity is treated like a Lego set you can construct rather than a reality you discover. And men, in this framework, we're optional. We aren't necessary for the infrastructure anymore. We aren't trusted as the authority anymore. And increasingly, we just aren't present. So what does the modern man do? We do what anyone else does when we feel obsolete. We check out. We retreat into the digital world. We hide in distractions. We stop building. I mean, why build a house when the foundation is shifting sand? Why aim for a target that moves every time you pull the trigger? When our purpose disappears, we men drift. But here's the thing. This new world we think we've created, we didn't. It was the decision of a few men up top that created our current chaos and disorder. But here's the thing. It only took one man to set things right. There's a story from 2,000 years ago that maps this out perfectly. Picture a woman walking to a well in the middle of the day. In that culture, you went to the well in the morning or in the evening when it was cool. If you're there at high noon, you're there because you're avoiding people, or better said, avoiding judgment. So she arrives at the well and she meets a man sitting there. His name? Jesus. When you look at her life, it's absolute chaos. 5 husbands. And the guy she's with now? Not her husband at all. Her morality issue became a pattern in her life. It's the same pattern we see today. We're all searching, replacing one another, ultimately trying to fill a void with a series of self-proclaimed internal truths that never actually satisfied. But then Jesus does something that would get any of us men canceled in 3 seconds today. He tells her the truth. Straight, no chaser. He didn't give her a trigger warning or affirm her journey first. He says, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now isn't even yours. And what's wild is that she doesn't run away. She doesn't scream about her lived experience or claim that Jesus didn't make her feel safe. Instead, she leans in to hear more. Because deep down, we don't actually want comfort, but the truth, even if it sucks to hear it. Jesus stood in objective truth and he spoke it clearly. But with that truth, he offered her hope. He offered her salvation. He offered her living water. And that right there is exactly what is missing from the world right now. Men have been trained to believe that telling the truth is dangerous. We've been told that clarity is offensive. We've been convinced that if we stand firm, it will cost us everything. So we got quiet and we withdrew. But while we were gone, things don't get better. They get worse. Truth doesn't maintain itself. It has to be lived. It has to be spoken sometimes with aggression or emotion. But what I found most effective is speaking in the quiet confidence of someone who knows where the ground is. This isn't about blaming anyone because to some degree, we all share a piece of it. What I'm trying to do is point out what happens when a culture shifts its foundations from objective truth to internal feeling. Once that happens, everything becomes negotiable. Your identity, your purpose, your very soul. And that last one isn't something you want to negotiate away. But there is a way forward. It's not by checking out. It's by standing firm. It's by giving an honest day's work. It's by building something that matters. By refusing to lower your standards just to be accepted. Because maybe your boss may not appreciate it, but your creator sees all. We gotta be the kind of man that doesn't need validation from the world because he's grounded in something the world didn't create. Because whether society wants to admit it or not, men are still needed, probably more than ever. So if this video resonated with you, I think you'll find this video even more interesting. And if you felt this shift in your life, or if you're feeling it now, or if you're feeling this feeling that everything is up for negotiation, drop a comment. I read every single one. And remember, there's an explanation for everything. Let's find it together. And I'll see you at the next one.